You have your niche, your idea, and maybe even your Etsy shop open. Super excited. You're super pumped up. You're ready to go, ready to get this business going. But then you go to put up a listing and you hear screech marks because you have to put a price in there. And you're like, oh crap, what do I list this thing for? How do I know what to sell it for? I have no idea what the right price is. So it stops you dead in your tracks and you're not sure what you want to do next. This is what I want to talk about today so I can help you with this deceivingly complicated decision. Let's go. Everyone, what is going on? Welcome back to the Handmade and Beyond podcast. Glad to be back with you guys. LL here, your host and your guide through your Etsy and handmade journey. How are you guys doing? Hopefully you guys are doing all right as we roll into 2023, almost a month down already, which is crazy. Things are already flying by and moving faster than ever. And so I want to talk about a really important topic today. As I'm trying to stay warm in my office here. It is in the 40s in South Florida, which is crazy. There's been ice on the windows and it's just not fun stuff. We don't have ice scrapers here. I mean, come on. So this is just, it's not ideal, and we're going to, of course, be wimps about it. People up north, it's been in like the 20s and 30s and stuff like that. But our blood is thinned. You know, I'm from the north, but my blood's thin now. When it hits the 50s, I'm freezing. So I don't like cold weather. That's why I moved to Florida. It's because I don't want to deal with the cold weather. So you guys the cold weather can get on out of here. So I am trying to stay warm. I already had a pot of coffee. I think it's working. I don't know. But today I want to talk about pricing your products. And before I get started today, since we are rolling into the new year, I want to make sure that you guys are ready to go with your goals and putting an action plan together, action items together that align with your goals so that you can reach your goals for 2023, because this year is already flying by. So you got to do this now so you know what to work on, what to improve on, what steps to take in order to hit your goals for 2023. Because before you know it, this year's going to be halfway over, 3/4 of the way over, and you're going to be like, crap, I didn't do any of this. I don't have a plan. I don't know what I'm doing. So make sure you guys get the goal setting guide at handmadeandbeyond.com/goals. It's a free guide to at least get you thinking about this stuff so that you can take the appropriate action to reach your goals. You got to have a plan. Running your own business, you have to have a plan. You can't do it willy-nilly because then you're going to get nothing done. Trust me, I know. I floundered with this the first 2 years. I stepped away from my corporate job to do this full time. So make sure you guys get that guide so you can at least get some help doing this stuff and getting your action items aligned with your goals. All right, so let's dive into pricing your products. This is something that really kind of stops people in their tracks. It's really a mundane thing. You wouldn't think that it's as complicated as it is. You're like, oh, I'll just set a price and move on. But it's a lot more complicated than that because there's a lot of factors to consider when it comes to pricing. You can't just throw a price out there and expect everyone to pay that price. You got to at least do your due diligence so that you can set the right price according to several variables, several factors that I'm going to go over. So there's 3 factors to consider when it comes to pricing. What are your costs? What does it cost to make your products? Or if you outsource the manufacturing, what does that cost for them to make the products that you design? What's your profit margin? So this really, you need a starting price to figure this out because it takes the costs and then the amount that you're selling it for, and that's your profit margin. But I'm going to get into that. And the third factor is what's the market or the competition doing with their pricing? What are they setting their pricing at? What's the demand? What's the customers demanding as far as price? Because you have to use that. You have to consider that. Doesn't mean you have to follow it exactly, but you have to consider what your competition is doing. And it's going to be across the board, so to speak. But you can kind of use that information to guide you. So those are the 3 factors that you have to consider early on. I'm going to dive into each so that you can kind of use them to your advantage. And kind of to backtrack a little bit, this exercise really should be done early on in your journey to consider or to ensure your niche has enough profit margin to be sustainable. I'd like to I'd like people to shoot for at least a 30% profit margin. It's not always that way, but the thing that you have to consider when it comes to finding your niche, finding out what you're going to sell, what you're going to produce, and how this exercise will help you is if you don't have enough profit margin, you're not going to have enough money to cover fees. You're not going to have enough money to cover fee increases. You're not going to have enough money for promotions, for sales, for coupons, things that help drive conversion and drive sales. A lot of people don't think about that early on. They're like, oh, I have a 5% profit margin. That's fine. There's still money on the table. Well, once you figure in fees, once you figure in promotions, that's going to get ate up really fast. And then the recent fee increase, like people were all bent out of shape last year, that won't be a problem if you have enough profit margin. Yeah, we don't like fee increases, but that's part of the business. Part of playing, part of using the Etsy as your selling platform is you got to pay fees. You got to pay fees anywhere you go. Even if you do a Shopify store that's technically your own, there are still transaction fees that you will have to pay, even with your own website. You're paying for the service, so you will pay fees anywhere. It's part of the part of doing business. So you got to make sure your profit margin is high enough to cover those things, and that should be part of your research. If you're early on in the game, you're kind of looking at a couple different niches. Do this exercise to ensure you have enough profit margin to move forward, because it's not going to be sustainable if you don't have enough profit margin. It's going to get old really fast. You're not going to be making any money. Making a couple of cents per sale is not any fun. So you got to at least make a chunk of money to keep skin in the game. I know this. I mean, this may be fun. It may start off as a hobby, but you got to be keeping money. You got to be making money. You can't lose money early on. It's going to stop being fun really, really fast. All right. So where to start? The first place you need to start is figuring out your costs. Your costs are the materials it costs to make your item. Any type of material costs, supply costs. You also want to figure in how much it costs to ship your item, packing supplies. If you ship it in a mailer, you use printer paper, you use ink to print out your packing slips. All those costs you need to add up. And then that is going to play into figuring out your profit margin. Now, the thing that gets a little tricky is your some of your costs, maybe for like machinery. Those may be big ticket items to get you started. So you have to break that down into an average sale cost. So, for instance, if you pay $1,000 to buy a screen printing press or buy some type of special printer, divide that out between, do an estimate of your goal. Maybe you want to get 1,000 sales. We'll divide that put a little bit of that into each of those sales as far as your costs go. So for me, I do like $1. Eventually it will even out. You're not going to recoup all that costs immediately because you're going to be underwater. And so that is an investment. Break it out into an average per sale, and that's going to be part of your cost. But do it something that's reasonable, and that should also play into, is this niche right for you? How much money are you putting up front? Maybe you can scale it down, start a little bit smaller, and then upgrade your stuff as you go. So keep it simple. Don't overthink this. The main thing is the supply costs, material costs. I wouldn't figure in labor right now, because that any extra profit you're going to put into your pocket, that's going to be part of the money that you're making to sustain you. So you can figure out labor costs later on as you get a good idea of what stuff is selling for, but I wouldn't figure that in right now. It's just going to muddy the water and complicate things. So if you have a decent profit margin without factoring in labor, you're at a good place. You're at a good starting point. So figure in your costs. And what does it cost you to make your item, one of your item? Now, if you make different items, there may be a range or an average, and that's fine too. Most people make pretty much the same items, so they have the same cost. But if you make different stuff, figure out the cost for each, and then do an average of those costs. Now, the next thing to do is use this method to come up with a starting price. So this is pretty much the standard method for figuring out pricing. And this is going to give you a good starting point. So usually you take your costs times 2 is going to give you your wholesale cost. So if your cost to make your items is $5, times 2 is $10. That's your wholesale pricing. If you do wholesale down the road, it's always good to know that. Someone may approach you to buy a bulk number of items at a wholesale cost. Well, boom, now you know your wholesale cost. The next step is figuring out your retail costs. So usually that is your wholesale cost times 2. So if your wholesale cost is $10 because your supply or your actual cost is $5 times 2, it's $10. Now to figure out your retail cost, you take that $10 times 2. So your retail cost then becomes $20. So that is what you should set as your pricing or as your starting point for pricing your product. That'll give you a good place to start. The next step is, now that you have your pricing, you can figure out your profit margin based on that starting price. So I would recommend using a calculator. Not Etsy. Alora has a completely free Etsy fee calculator, which figures out your profit margin according to Etsy fees. So go in there. I'll drop a link below and figure out your profit margin based on your costs. So it has instructions for how to use it. But basically, you set your selling price that includes shipping costs, and then you actually put your actual costs, which also includes shipping costs there, and it calculates your profit margin based on those costs and all of the Etsy fees. It figures in the 6.5% transaction fee, 20% listing fee, 3% processing fee, plus the 25-cent processing fee for each transaction process. So it does all that math for you. Don't sit down and do that math yourself. I mean, this makes it super, super easy. So you basically, what you do is you sit down with this calculator to figure out your profit margin based on that initial price. So figure it out based on the $20. You have to know or have a general idea of what you're going to charge for shipping, because that plays into your costs. If you're doing free shipping, that's added to your cost. That's not recouped. If you're doing $5 shipping and it costs $5 shipping, you're still putting that in, but that's going to be a wash then. If you're doing calculated shipping, where Etsy calculates it for you and it's different for each buyer, just do an average. Figure out the average. You can do a shipping calculator on USPS.com. Ship your item to Oregon, ship it to California, ship it to somewhere on the East Coast to kind of figure out your differences for first class or priority shipping or however you're doing it. But you can kind of figure in an average there. It should be an average. Don't spend a ton of time on it, but you have to factor in shipping costs, because it does really impact your profit margin. So figure out that using this calculator, and that'll give you a good starting point on your profit margin. And then from there, what you need to do is do some research on your competition. Whether you're just going into Etsy and searching for competition based on your niche, based on your actual products, what you should do, or again, you can use Alora and use the keyword finder, and it'll give you average prices for the top 100 listings ranking for that keyword. So if you're searching for a specific, a coffee mug, it'll give you the average pricing. Or you're searching for a piece of canvas art, or a shelf, or a planter box, whatever. I don't know. People sell planter box. That's really big. Probably a bad idea. Graphic tee, different things like that. You'll get an average price of the top listings ranking for that keyword. Will all the listings be your specific product? No. That's why you take the average. So see how close that average price is to the exercise we did earlier. So your retail price should be $20. What's the average price? If the average price is $10, we got to look into this a little bit more, because that is super low. Now, will there be some people probably in the $10 range? Absolutely. Some people, based on mass sellers, they can operate at a super low profit margin. That doesn't mean that you have to do that. So that's why the average is important. You can even go above the average. That's fine too. You may want to start above the average, especially if you're offering a superior product. If you're offering a superior quality product of superior materials. Like for me, I go above the average because I offer only the softest, most comfortable graphic tees. I don't offer that 100% cotton stuff. I don't like the way that it fits. I don't like the way that it feels. I only wear poly blend stuff. So that's what I offer. So I can charge more because it's a superior product. I'm not as worried about that. So, and you can do in your listings, you can add that value with your pictures, with your descriptions to justify the increased price. You can't just throw it out there and not put the time into the value to justify your price for a higher price. You got to make sure that you're doing that. And people are fine spending more for a higher quality product. And that's perceived through pictures, through your video, through your descriptions, the things that you're saying about the item, also through eventually reviews and things like that will help other people, and help you justify the price for your item. So don't always go low. That's a race to the bottom. That's not going to sustain you. Go, if anything, go somewhere in the middle based on these factors that I told you, based on competition, based on the exercise of the 2 times 4, the wholesale times 2. That'll give you a really, really good starting point based on your costs. Now, if you're way high, if you do that exercise and you're way higher than the competition, like I talked about earlier, it could be you that's inflating that price based on higher supply costs. All right, so that could happen too. Maybe it shouldn't cost that much, but your supplies are a lot higher than the competition. Why may that be? Well, that could be because you're not paying wholesale pricing for your supplies, which means you have to look online and get a wholesale provider for your supplies. Some wholesalers require an EIN number, which you can get. You can file with the government as a sole proprietor and get an EIN number so you can get wholesale pricing from these different suppliers. Or if you have an LLC, you'll get an EIN number and you can apply for tax exempt status and get the wholesale pricing. But most wholesalers will want that. So that they can give you basically just got to send them that, and then they will give you the wholesale pricing and give you the tax exempt pricing so you don't have to pay full price. Now, other factors may play into the wholesale. You may have to pay for shipping or order a certain amount to get free shipping. So make sure you're looking at that. But usually that will get your prices way down if you can do wholesale stuff. Initially, maybe you want to wait to get wholesale to make sure that this is going to work and it's going to be viable for you. You pay full price for stuff. That's fine. Just know that factor in your profit margin and your costs once you're getting wholesale pricing to just make sure that you have enough profit margin. Because if you can't get your prices down to at least a sustainable level, then it's really probably not worth it pursuing. If your margins, like I said before, if your margins are super tight, it may not be worth it. The only time it may be worth it is for PO-to-me. Print-on-demand companies can operate, or print-on-demand shops can operate at a smaller profit margin because they have set costs. They're not buying supplies. They're not doing any of the work. They're just putting their stuff out there, and then the POD company is producing it. But even then, you have to make sure your profit margins are high enough because you have to figure in fees and sales and marketing. So it's often harder to get your profit margins up with POD because it can get very expensive. Since they're doing all the work for you, they're going to charge a premium for doing that for you. So you have to do your due diligence with the different POD companies to make sure you have one that can get you the most profit margin. And it gets a little tricky. There's different things that you can do. I'm not going to get into it in this episode to set yourself apart with POD. There's a lot of competition out there. Shouldn't deter you. You can still make some decent money with POD, but it's a little bit different of a ballgame. So use those things to set your pricing. I know it's not as complicated as it may seem, but this should give you a good starting point. And it doesn't mean that this is going to be your pricing forever. Start somewhere, see what the market tells you, see if you're getting sales. You may have to adjust things. You may have to continually look at your competition to kind of see what they're doing. Doesn't mean you have to follow them. Don't let that. A lot of people get super deterred when it comes to their competition. They're so low. They're yada yada. That's fine. They're only a small fish in the sea compared to all the other buyers out there. You just need a small piece of the pie. Etsy is huge. There's millions of buyers. The Etsy buyers in your niche aren't probably seeing a lot of your competition. They're gonna find you in search, and if they like what they see, and it's high quality item, there's a good chance that they're gonna buy from you and not necessarily look for the lowest price thing. So it works. Most platforms now, it comes down to, okay, what is the price? What's the perceived quality? What are the reviews? And then from there, they make their decision. I know for me, if I see something that's super low price and it looks cheap, I'll spend more money all day long. On Amazon, obviously I look for reviews and I'll look at the perceived quality, and oftentimes, probably more times than not, I'll spend a couple dollars more for something that I think is going to be more durable, last a little bit longer, and it's a better quality item. I'm not necessarily always going to get the cheapest item. So just keep that in mind when you're setting your prices. Hopefully that helps you guys out. That is it for today's episode. Make sure you guys get that goal setting worksheet as well at handmadeandbeyond.com/goals. But get in there, use the Allura calculator. There'll be a link below. It is free. It will help you set your prices. And then if you want to take it a step further, you can join Allura's free. They have a free version or a trial period, and you can use their keyword finder to find average prices depending on keywords, which will really kind of take things to the next level and give you the information that you need to make your decisions and set your prices accordingly. That is it, guys. Have an amazing rest of your day. I'll be back soon with another episode soon.